There's no hill we can't climb. There's no mountain too high for us now. There's no reason to hide. Just like
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Abuse Recovery Success. I'm super stoked to have our guest today, and we have him in person. We've got Mick, who's an entrepreneur, but more importantly, he's here because he's in recovery too. And really the goal of this podcast is to allow you, the listeners, to see that recovery comes in all shapes and sizes. And Mick is here to share his journey, his story of strength and hope, and also what he's been through. Mick, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm excited for the listeners to hear a little bit about your journey. You know, I know a little bit about you from Cassidy, and I'm excited to really get the full story on what happened and who you are today. So without further ado, Mick, share with us.
Oh, perfect. So my name is Mick. It's weird because I feel like I always introduce myself as my name's Mick, I'm with Pro West Roofing, or my name's Mick, I'm a grateful alcoholic.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the two. Like my last name doesn't exist.
Okay.
And so you'd like for me to just share from the jump?
Yeah, like if you could just tell us your story, and then I'll ask you the questions and we'll go from there.
Terrific. So I guess I'll start off with this. I just celebrated 8 years sober.
That's awesome.
July 10th, 2013.
I love it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's so cool.
It's been a wild ride. All of recovery, the last 8 years have been just crazy. Lots of ups and downs. But starting before then, I guess, give me a little bit of background on myself and how it all started. So first and foremost, I really believe a lot in like the family origins, right?
Sure.
It plays a huge factor into into my youth, right? So I'm adopted, right? And my birth father is an addict, and my birth mother is not, but has alcoholism on her side.
Sure.
Right. So from the jump, it was almost like I was fucked, right? Yeah. But I come from a loving family. My parents, there was no lack of love. There was no abuse growing up. I had every opportunity that I could want, right?
Yeah.
And I grew up in North Scottsdale.
Sure.
And I started drinking when I was 11 years old. I was trying to do the math. I was trying to remember recently when I started drinking, because I think it's coming close to I've been sober longer than I was actually drinking and using, which is wild. I remember thinking about that early in recovery, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
If recovery overlapped.
Yeah, if it could eclipse.
Yeah, exactly. And so I started drinking when I was 11. Nothing was going wrong in my life. I wasn't trying to cover anything up. I wasn't even celebrating anything. But I took the first drink, and then the drink took me, right? The first time I drank, I got drunk. And most times after that, when I drink, I got drunk. Yeah. It filled up a God-sized hole that I didn't know was there, right? And granted, I was young when I started getting loaded, and so it didn't just take off. Like I didn't go to jail the next day, right?
Yeah.
But gradually throughout high school, it got worse. I can remember I always kind of dabbled, right? Going through middle school, through high school. I think I smoked weed every day from my sophomore year until the day I got sober, right? But graduating high school, I got asked to leave the high school I went to my last semester of senior year. So I finished out in public school, where I was ahead on credits and didn't have very much supervision and didn't really go to class, right? So I somehow graduated high school, and that summer was when things really, really got bad. I was introduced to benzos, Xanax. I was smoking every day. I started drinking every day. I was selling drugs, as well as I started to get on opiates, specifically codeine syrup. And I remember so I'm in 12 steps, right? And there's this line in the big book. It says it ceased to become a luxury and it became a necessity. And that was my experience, right? Like there was a time when it was a lot of fun, You know, like I'd be lying if I didn't say I loved it, and I had a lot of fun, and we had great times. But at a certain point, like that wasn't the case anymore. It got bad, and it was every day, and I started to watch people fall away, right? And I started to become a liability. I experienced the consequences. I experienced getting arrested. I experienced totaling multiple cars. I experienced getting kicked out of school, getting kicked out of my parents' house, being robbed. All the things happened, right? But it wasn't necessarily the things that got me sober, right? Because when I listened to other people share their experience, what it was like was different. What they were like was the same. Yeah. Right. And what that tells me is I suffer from an internal condition. And the external never was quite enough. The consequences weren't enough to push me to do anything different. But it was when I internally, the loneliness, the despair, the depression, the anxiety, that's what became too much for me to bear. And so I remember the turn of events to the catalyst was really I was living in an apartment in South Scottsdale. No one would talk to me anymore, right? Like I remember I would wake up, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I woke up pissed that I woke up. Yeah. Like I thought I had gotten loaded enough the night before to not wake up, right? Because I was definitely suicidal, but I wasn't. I was suicidal, but I was too much of a pussy to put a gun in my mouth and actually pull the trigger. You know, there was too much fear there, so I just I went on existing. Yeah, and I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of having to continue to live. Like I was afraid I wasn't gonna die, and but I wasn't gonna die, but I was never gonna get help, and I was never gonna find a solution. And so, an absolute godsend. A friend of mine who stuck by my side, most of the way, and she saw all the turns of events. I was over at her house. She was one of the only people that would let me over still, and I was loaded, and I was talking to her one night, and I was just telling her how bad it was, and she was like, let's get you help. Like, why don't you talk to your parents and get into treatment? And I didn't have the balls to talk to my parents, so she was like, I'll go with you. I'll make the call. I'll go with you. I was like, great. I woke up the next day and I was like, oh shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? And she reached out to my parents, but my parents didn't really know quite how bad it was. Yeah. So it took a little while, but eventually she took me over to their house, and we sat down, and she explained to them that I was struggling with drugs and alcohol. And my parents were like, okay, like, we know. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a surprise. But again, I don't think my parents knew to the extent. Yeah. And so some time went by. They were like, we'll look into a program. My grandma had passed away a little while prior to this, and I went with my mom on a trip to Iowa, which is where my grandma was from, to visit family. And that's when my mom saw my alcoholism and drug addiction like firsthand. And the entire time I was there, I drank, and I drank, and I drank, and I drank, and I took pills, and I drank. And she texted my dad, and she was like, "We need to do something for Mick." This was summertime. This was probably May or June, and she was like, and she told him, "I don't think our son will make it through the summer if we don't do something to help him." And I think internally, like I wanted them to see that. I don't think I had a choice, you know what I mean? But I definitely was not going to hide it because they needed to see that. So I came back, and a couple weeks go by, and I go out to dinner with my parents, and they're like, "We found a place for you." I was like, "That's great. It's summertime. I'm partying. Let's wrap this up in the summer." And they're like, "No, I don't think you understand. Like, you go, or you call us when you're ready, and you don't call us until then." And I was like, great, I'll call you when I'm ready, but that's not now. And so my last run really was I went to Mission Beach, 4th of July weekend, right? And I don't know if you or any of the listeners have been to Mission Beach on 4th of July, but it is crazy. And I remember one of my friends had a place, and it was right on the boardwalk, and we were standing on the balcony of this house, and I had known this girl since I was in grade school, like since I was a little kid, and it was one of those friendships that had distanced, but she was periodically still there. I remember talking to her, and again, it was one of those conversations where she was like, dude, like, what happened to you? Like, you're not okay. And I told her, I was like, look, when I get back to Arizona, I'm going to rehab. Like, I made the decision right then and there. I was like, I couldn't get high enough when I was there for it to be fun. It just wasn't. And so I had that conversation. I get home, called my dad, and I said, hey, Dad, you better get me on a flight before I can change my mind. He said, great. And called me back like 30 minutes later. He's like, perfect. 2 days, you're leaving for Montana. And I said, all right. And I was terrified, and I didn't know what to expect. And all I required was that they let me smoke cigarettes. I was like, as long as I can smoke cigarettes, like I'm gonna be all right. And I did, and I went to this place called Wilderness Treatment Center in Montana. And I believe that you have a window of willingness and a window of opportunity. And there's times when the window of willingness is shut and the window of opportunity is open. And there's times when the window of opportunity was shut and the window of willingness was open. When I landed in Kalispell, Montana, I got off the plane. This airport is super, super small. And there's like 2 or 3 gates, but there's a bar, right? And I walk up to the bar, and I didn't have my fake ID. And I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. And I ordered, gin was my drink. I've got a bottle of Bombay tattooed on me. And they didn't have Bombay, but they had gin. And so I asked for a double Tanqueray and tonic, and they served it to me. I got sober when I was 19 years old, right? And so they served me by some miracle, and I sat there, and I drank that drink. And for some reason, there was something in me that knew that could be my last drink. And so I savored every sip. And I got off the plane, and as soon as the plane landed, I ate a handful of Xanax, drank my drink, went beyond the security line, and there was the guy waiting for me. And I got in the truck, and he took me to the treatment center, and I don't remember my intake. I don't remember getting there. I don't remember my intake. I don't remember unpacking my bags. This is what I do remember, though, is I kind of came to, right? And Montana is just they don't call it big sky country for nothing. I mean, I'm surrounded by mountains and trees, and the way it was set up was almost, they had cabins that we stayed in, and then we did groups every day. And so I was at this picnic table, and at that point in time, for some reason, I had willingness, honesty, and I was open-minded. And I never had those before in my life. And for some reason, at that point in time, I said, fuck it. I'll be honest. I don't have anything to lose. Fuck it. I'm here for 60 days. I may as well give it a shot. And I'm willing that something can change. I don't know if it will. I didn't necessarily go because I wanted to get sober. I went because I knew people that did what I did and drank like I drank, used like I used, and felt like I felt. I'd watched enough intervention to know that those people go to rehab. And that was my best shot. And so I came to rehab. Rehab introduced me to the 12 steps. That was a little bit over 8 years ago. And life is different, and life is good. And I haven't had to get loaded in quite some time.
I love that story. And it's actually so funny that you mentioned that whole part about rehab, because I was thinking about it for some odd reason the other day. I was thinking about how fucked up I got before I went to rehab, and it's like something everyone does. I mean, I'm going to say everyone, but most people try to get as bombed as you can before you go in. And probably normal people wouldn't understand that. No. But I was like, they test, I think I blew like a 0.39 or something insane. And I remember like a couple of weeks in, I'm like going to the lunch hall or the cafeteria, whatever. And one of the guys that works there is like, hey, April, do you remember what you said to me when you first got in? And I said, no, because I was in a blackout, and he said, I said something like, watch your mouth when you're talking to me like that or something, I don't know, something crazy, but I had no idea what was going on. I went to Sierra Tucson in Tucson, and I was, there was like a bar not far from the rehab, and whoever was dropping me off, we stopped there, and I had a friend from Tucson that met me, and I was like, this is my last drinking, and I didn't really savor it. For me, unfortunately, I have a story of relapse, so that wasn't the last stretch for me, but I definitely resonate to that story. I guess going back, what I'd like to ask you, because I'm happy I'm having you on, because you don't often get to meet someone that got sober so young. I've had, I think, one other guest in that kind of age bracket. And so I guess, it's funny, you said when you were at that Mission Beach and your friend was saying that, was there part of you in that moment that just felt almost like you didn't fit in anymore as well? Like, because if your friend's saying that, I feel like kids in general at that age, they're getting fucked up, they're sloppy, whatever. Like, what would you say? Because we have some younger listeners. What kind of made you think, maybe I don't want to see how this plays out or whatever? Yeah,
that's a great question. I knew that the way I drank and got high was different than other people, because they were drinking without impunity, right? Like, for some reason, and I remember this when I got sober, is like, we went to the same parties. I got arrested, you didn't. You know what I mean? It's like we drank out the same bottle.
Yeah.
I disappointed my parents. Like, you have a great relationship with your family and you show up. You know what I mean? And internally, just, I knew, like, I felt different. And so as far as getting sober young, I'm incredibly grateful I got sober so young. I've never had a legal drink, which is wild.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got to the rooms of the 12 steps, it was like, I heard all these people, older people, right, talking about these things that they lost. Like, they lost the house, they lost the wife, they lost the car, they lost the kids, right? And what I realized was, if I continued getting loaded the way I got loaded, I never had the opportunity to get those things. Like I couldn't lose those things. I couldn't get those things the way that I started so young. I remember when I got sober, so everybody came up to me, I wish I got sober at your age. You don't know how lucky you are. And I didn't, and I don't. And it's just my experience getting sober young. And I remember I was in a halfway house, 19, 20 years old. And I'd go on Snapchat or Instagram or whatever. And all my friends were, in college, and they were going to parties. And I felt this, like, kind of felt like I was missing out, but I was also kind of like, I've done that to the greatest extent I could do that. But there was a part of me that was like, I'm never going to have the college experience, right? That people have or whatever. And, on the flip side of that is getting sober so young has been such an asset. Like, I feel that I have this set of tools that has pushed me so much farther in life, right? And it's crazy. One of my really good friends that I used to get loaded with, it was that summer after I graduated, and I slept on his couch for weeks, and he would drive around while I was getting loaded because I was too drunk to drive my car. And it was funny. He hit me up for a job. He sent just a year ago, almost a year ago to the date. He reached out to me. He was like, hey, can I send you my resume? And I was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, cause getting sober, I thought I was so behind the eight ball from everybody. I was like, I got to catch up. I was actually getting sober put me like strides ahead. Yeah.
Well, I feel like in general, especially probably the first couple of years of sobriety, I would like be around people in recovery, and then, you know, you go into the real world and I'd be like, those people are crazy, you know, in that real world, because there is a very different approach to how we handle things when we're being healthy. Because I'll be the first to admit, you know, I love AA. I don't go as regularly as I should, and I get a little squirrely and crazy. Like, I might be sober, but I'm not always acting perfectly mentally fit. So, but when we're really in recovery and we're committed and we're using the principles and acting all of that out and following the steps, like, it is a very healthy way to live. And I think it does give you a plethora more tools in your toolbox in dealing with the journey of life. And I too, like, you know, I got sober much later in life compared to you, but I always feel like I'm playing catch up because, you know, I did have that wasted time. But I do think sometimes I also think this, like, even just fitness and all that, like, I don't have to worry about the calories of alcohol. Like, some people come in and they're talking to me, and, you know, we own a med spa and we do different things there, and they're like, oh, you know what, I can't give up my wine. And I'm like, you know, I don't have to deal with that. And same thing probably for you being in the construction and contracting. Like, there's a lot of people that are waking up hungover in that industry, and you're outperforming them every day. Sometimes when I do have those moments of like, oh, I can't drink like other people, I'm out and about and I see them and I'm like, you know what, they're going to be hungover tomorrow and I'll be up at 4, you know, making money. So there's that to be said. I want to ask you a little bit about, you know, how the relationship with the family is now. And then also, like, you know, you touched on you're married. Is that someone that you met in recovery? Tell me a little bit about how the family dynamics work.
Yeah, of course. So I have a great relationship with my family. My mom, my dad, my birth mom. I don't really talk to my birth father much. He's sober, actually. He's got 8 years. Last I checked, sober. So that's really cool. And I remember when I was getting sober, he had reached out to me and was like, it's great to see you getting sober. You know, you can do it. But the relationship with my mom and dad is, I mean, it's great. I should call them more. I don't. I love them. They love me. And there's a lot of trust there. It's amazing to hear the comments that come out of my parents' mouth. You know, just how proud of me they are and how they don't worry about me. And this is a crazy story. Is when I was getting loaded, there was a period of time when my parents let me live at their house, right? And I was selling drugs at the time. So there were definitely suspicious characters coming in and out the house and by the house. And my dad traveled a lot for work growing up. And so that left my mom home alone and with me and my little brother. And she told me this after I got sober, that she felt she was in such fear of me and my actions that she felt the need to sleep with a loaded .357 Magnum in her nightstand. And for those listeners that know anything about guns, that's a big gun for like a little old lady, you know? And I was just like, oh my God, like that's the state of fear that I put people around me in. And so today it's like that's not a thing. Like I've got a code to my parents' house. You know what I mean? Like they, it's a great relationship there, and they're just not worried. They can sleep at night. And I feel like I owe it to them to give them that sleep.
That's awesome.
As far as my wife goes, I got married last year in October.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. She's amazing.
And is she in recovery or met elsewhere?
So it's funny. So she was, she doesn't drink. Yeah. But she was, I met her in the rooms of AA. She was put into treatment at a really young age. I think younger than when I went to treatment. That program told her she was an addict. Yeah. And that if she ever got loaded again, she'd die. Yeah. And she was in AA for I think three or 4 years or so. She came to the internal realization that she had a lot of trauma she needed to deal with that the 12 steps didn't address, and that she wasn't actually a drug addict or an alcoholic. She just had trauma that pushed her to want to use. And so she made the decision to step away and seek therapy and other help. And I mean, she's been great ever since. And so I met her in the rooms. She currently doesn't drink. But she is very, very involved in Koanon, which is like Al-Anon for Cocaine Anonymous, and she's a therapist, and I mean for me, it's incredibly important that my partner be committed to growth.
Yeah.
And I've been with many women that aren't.
Yeah.
And I've realized that doesn't sit well for me. I don't care what you're doing, but you got to do something because I'm doing something. And if we're not growing together, we're growing apart.
Yeah.
And so she's had an amazing journey of healing, and it's been great to support her and watch her along that.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, some people would even ask, you that question. Like when people do get sober so young, I think, there might be times that it crosses your mind, not in regards to her trauma or any of that, but like, am I really an addict? And I was going to ask you, like, how you felt when you had your 21st birthday or, any of that. But I think that's, and I want to be careful with my listeners. That's a personal journey and it's not one that you want to take lightly. And everybody has to figure that path out on their own. I, in general, just kind of believe drinking is for the birds, like at the end of the day, you're imbibing a poison into your body. It serves no purpose at all. So, I think having my best relationships for me in my personal life are with people that don't seek escape and that handle things. And I always say, like, I handle life on life's terms. I don't check out. I don't tap out. I don't take any mind altering substances at all because I want to live this life as fully as possible. I guess I would ask you, Mick, if there was a listener right now that's maybe resonating with some of your story, but they're stuck in it, they're young, they're stuck in it, they're not sure what to do, what would be something you'd want to transport into them to kind of, like relay a message or strength, or what your thoughts would be for them?
Reach out for help.
Okay.
Reach out for help. You don't have to live that way, right? There is a solution.
Yeah.
And you can get the solution, and it takes work, and it's hard, and it's uncomfortable. But there's a life out there that you can't even imagine.
Yeah.
You can imagine your best life, and the life here in recovery doesn't even, far surpasses that. I always believe that if I were to have gotten everything I wanted, I would have sold myself short, without a doubt. Reach out for help.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said, like, reach out for help. And it doesn't, like, there's some people that are against AA. There's some people that like AA.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, like, give it a shot. And I always said, like, go to a lot of different meetings, because there's definitely meetings I don't like to go to.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's meetings that I relate to. And maybe your path or your journey, you won't end up choosing AA as your part of your path. But at least I say give it a shot. Give everything a shot. To me, the more you can do, the better.
I'm the same way. I'm by no means the guy that's like, AA is the way, the only way. I've seen people get sober by like going and hiking crazy trails, and like, there's, for me, what and I guess I should be clear about this, is what the 12 steps in AA has done, it has connected me to a spiritual solution. It is the spiritual solution by which I live by and keeps me sober. Right? I've gotten my sponsor's guidance on stuff, and I've asked him, and I said, you know what? God tells me to do this. I'm going to do this. Yeah. And that's what it has done. It has connected me to a power greater than myself, keeps me sober. People are faulty. Meetings are faulty. But I think what I've seen as the commonality, I'm sure you've seen something like this too, is between all recovery is some sort of spiritual connection. I think just as humans, like we need that. And by drinking and using, it completely blocked me from that. And I've had surgeries in recovery. I've had 2 ACL surgeries, and I've had to take pain meds, which is always like a weird line to walk. And I remember the last knee surgery I had, I hated it. Yeah. This is crazy. I hated having to take the pain meds.
You're so crazy right now, because I agree. Yeah. I had to have a dental surgery, and I took like 1 or 2 of the pills, and I was like, and I just felt that tinge of like fog and like, and I was like, this is not good. And it felt sickening to me.
Well, it blocks me off. It blocks me off from you, from me, from God. Like I can't connect. And I don't like that. I'm like you. I like to be connected to life today.
Yeah.
I like to experience every bit of it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Okay, so Mick, before we part today, can you tell the listeners just a little bit about like what makes you today? Maybe a few daily practices that you utilize to kind of keep you grounded, or your recovery now.
Yeah, of course. Prayer and meditation, huge. I'm not as consistent as I'd like to be, and I think that's okay. But I do need to find time to connect to a power greater than myself, and I do need to find time to get quiet, and listen to where I'm being guided. So that's huge. For me, it's my circle of people is incredibly important. I've got a handful of men in my life that know everything about me, and I keep a very open line of communication with these people. A lot of times they know me better than myself. So communicating, talking to other people on a daily basis, really, prayer and meditation. I'm really big into goals and growing. I realized at some point along the way that like I didn't get sober to live a mediocre life. I got sober to live a kick-ass life. And so for me, like setting the goals and achieving that is huge for me. I'm really big on that.
I love that. And it's totally the way I feel too. Like, God didn't put me here to just squander the time. And, I want to experience things. And I also find that life is kind of sometimes like a game. And, why not try to play and win?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's hard for a listener hearing us chat like this, because it's like, dude, I'm just trying to get sober like for 1 hour, one day, and you feel like so broken. But the reality is you have two people sitting here right now that have been broken, that have been at their lowest point, that have made horrible decisions, gotten in trouble. And before we end, like I relate to not wanting to actually kill myself, but feeling like I wanted to be dead every day. And that's how low it was for me. So what we're sitting here, and the reason I do this podcast, and I'm sure why Mick wanted to be on today, is because we want to give you that hope that one day you too can be sitting chatting like us with years of sobriety under your belt, just, making plans. And it's pretty cool, like living life to its fullest. So Mick, thank you for joining us. I know that, you're on social media. I know you're kind of more grounded, just doing your thing, not like, looking for people to follow you. But what would be your final parting words you'd like to share with anyone struggling?
Reach out for help. I mean, if you like, you can post my social and DM me. Okay. Reach out. I'm more than happy.
How can they find you? What is it?
Coluccio, my Instagram is just at Mick, M-I-C-K, Coluccio, C-O-L-U-C-C-I-O.
Okay.
Follow me. Send me a DM. Reach out. I'm here to help. I'm here to talk. I'm here to grab coffee, whatever.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. We are a community. And guys, thank you for joining us in-person episode with Mick. Mick, thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Guys, if you want to find us, you can find me at April_the Hills on both TikTok and Instagram. You can find my podcast YouTube videos at April Hill on YouTube. And then our website is abuserecoverysuccess.com. Have a great day.